Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. It is Wednesday, April 1st. It is 3:30 p.m. Central Time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. President Trump will be speaking in what? I can do math, 4.5, 5 hours roughly. We are going to try to push this out before the speech. Even so, when you listen to this, President Trump's speech will have probably already happened. I tried to structure the conversation in such a way that you know what happens, whether he doubles down on victory or whether he doubles down on attacking Iran more, or whether there's something in between. But just understand that a lot can change based on what happens with President Trump's speech tonight. But Cousin and I go at it, the developments of the last week. You can email me at jacob@jacobshapiro.com if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. I think that's all the notes from me. Cheers. We'll see you out there. Watch party. Yeah, this is the pregame to the watch party. So we are recording Wednesday, April 1st, 2:13 p.m. Central Time. President Trump will be giving his speech later this evening. I couldn't decide which GIF I wanted to tweet out, so I did 3 at the same time yesterday, thinking that tacos were imminent. But I'm not so sure tacos are imminent, cousin, because the Iranians blew up a fully laden tanker in the Dubai port. You've got the Trump administration. I mean, one second they're saying negotiation, the second they're ready to do more. A whole lot that shows de-escalation. So maybe he's going to announce that he's taking Karg Island. We'll I don't know if this will go up before the speech actually happens. So we should try and at least frame our commentary around both scenarios there. But where do you want to start, cousin? It's I mean, a lot has happened in the last week, and nothing has happened in the last week.
So much has happened, we could do this every day pretty much and just have a constant commentary. What I would say, I would start off by saying, here's what's going to happen tonight. What's going to happen tonight is just great fucking television. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be Trump is his best. He is the content creator in chief. He does it brilliantly. You can hate him, you can love him. The fact of the matter is, man knows TV. Okay? He is more famous for The Apprentice than for pretty much anything else he's done. He is going to put on a show. And you know what? We're all going to watch it. I'm talking to clients who are going to have watch parties. People are going to stay up in Europe to watch it. I mean, this is just going to be great.
Wow.
And so I don't think that he can just taco. That would be a disappointing episode. It's a disappointing Apprentice season ending. I think what he's going to do is I think he's going to announce an exit from NATO. I think that tonight he's going to do the awesome zag on a zig, right? So we're all sitting here, Iran, Hormuz, oil, and he's going to be like, no, that's this episode. First of all, I declare victory and I'm going to take my toys and leave. So, if you want to call that taco, go ahead, Jacob, TDS in chief. No, what he's going to do is he's going to declare
taco
victory.
Derangement syndrome. I definitely have taco derangement syndrome.
I think we all do,
every day,
brother. By this point, we all have taco digestion syndrome. We haven't digested it, indigestion. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's going to do. And I just recorded a Real Vision hit with our friend Mikhail Rosenwald, and so it was his really he put that in my head. So I hate stealing ideas from other geopolitical analysts, as you do as well. We rarely even read anybody else other than our thoughts. That's why these are, by the way, if anyone listening to this podcast is like, wow, these guys are so natural. Yeah, because we didn't rehearse this. We don't read each other's views. We don't read each other's client production, which is hilarious. I bet people think we edit each other's works. No, that this wouldn't be natural. We get surprised, we get angry, we get flabbergasted by each other's takes. And so I do like to give props. And Mikhail, he was like, look, man, I think he's going to do something on NATO. I think he's right. I think that's a perfect way to distract from the morass, from the execution failure in Iran. I think it's a perfect way to end the season and set up the next season.
Which is? And by the way, I love that this is a distraction. So Iran was a distraction to Epstein, and so now NATO will be a distraction to Iran. And then what's the cliffhanger? What is he going to leave us on?
I don't know. And obviously, legally, the United States of America cannot leave NATO without congressional like vote. But it's okay. They can, they can fudge it. They can do all sorts of, like he can say he's pausing. He can move troops around. He can say, okay, well, I'm gonna like take some troops out, and it's gonna be a crisis. But this crisis is going to be good for everybody. Actually, I'm not saying that pulling troops out of NATO or abandoning NATO is objectively a good thing. I'm just saying that because it won't be legal, it's kind of a fake crisis. And it's just going to cause like European equities to rip higher because everyone will be like, oh, okay, fine. Now they got to really become geopolitical adults. They can't be geopolitical adolescents anymore. So I don't know. I think it's a cool way to kind of say like, look, I won here. Well, Mr. President, what about a regime? And now I'm going to leave NATO because our allies were mean to us and didn't come to our hour of need that we kind of created ourselves by like falling into a mistake. But move on.
No, it's not a mistake. There's been regime change. The Navy is
Oh,
wiped
sorry.
out. The Air Force is
That's
wiped
right.
out. Everything is fine.
Everything's
Everything is fine.
My bad. Sorry.
No, this is like totally subjective and very, very anecdotal. But I will say, you're right that Trump's superpower and genius is that he can find the thing that is going to make everyone collectively lose their minds to the extent that they forget the thing that they were losing their minds about before. And like just in the last hour, my Twitter has blown up with people talking about this NATO thing. Like it's
Yeah.
no longer anybody's talking about. I have like 100 notifications of like NATO this, NATO. Somebody just said the North American Terrorist Organization. Like they're just like going crazy
Nice.
about NATO. And some way, like he's put his finger on there, at least some way. But I think
Russia and China are like they're just standing there like, okay.
they're not standing. If that sound that you're hearing off in the distance, that's champagne bottles popping in
Not just
Beijing
that.
and Moscow. Like
But
they're like they don't have to lift a finger. It's just like, oh, the United States is literally like deconstructing this thing, which has contained and supported American power for so long.
No. They're holding a pillow to their face and screaming in excitement, like so that nobody hears them. Like this is one of those situations where like just don't do anything.
Don't do it like don't put out a 5-point peace plan with
nothing.
Pakistan, a
Well,
ceasefire, because they already did that.
I
Like
know,
that's
I
one of the
know.
big decision points of the last.
It was just
couple.
look. All I'm saying is like if you're Russia and China, just like be quiet. Just let this happen. Like let Donald Trump cook right now because like this is. I mean, like yeah, we're gonna distract from Iran by abandoning NATO, which of course is ridiculous because what was NATO supposed to do here? Like, uh, it would take 6 months of preparation and troop movements to have ground forces and naval forces in place to do what's happening in Iran. Oh, sorry, excuse me. To do what folks think is happening in the Persian Gulf, to do that correctly. Like none of that happened. And so, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Before, let's not get to. I want to talk about NATO in a second. I don't want to get sucked down the rabbit hole. This is how I've been thinking about it lately, or at least in the last day or two. It's not a perfect binary. Like nothing is binary, but I feel like there are two trajectories that this can go on. Behind door number A it's not quite a taco. It's a taco salad. It involves the United States declaring victory and pulling back and saying, okay, it's for the rest of the world to figure out. We got rid of the nuclear weapons, mission accomplished. The Strait of Hormuz is left in the control of Iran, maybe Oman as well, if Iran is feeling generous. Some kind of tolling mechanism is set up, maybe payable in Iranian rial, maybe yuan, maybe stable coins, who knows? But Iran gets to control who goes in and out of the Strait of Hormuz going forward, and enacts a cost for that. And maybe China is the guarantor of that system. And I think that's your best case scenario, because in that scenario, the Strait of Hormuz starts to normalize, and things start to get easier. I still think we're looking at energy disruption, everything else. But the best case scenario is a bunch of thuggish theocratic ghouls in Tehran successfully build a tolling booth around the Strait of Hormuz. Behind door B is, I mean, I hope I'm not being too hysterical here, cousin, is economic catastrophe. I mean, if this goes on for another 3 weeks, like President Trump has been suggesting, like his aides have been leaking to the Wall Street Journal and everybody else about the speech that is coming out later, we're going to be in the land of physical energy shortages. We're going to be in the land of petrochem shortages, everything else. And it also gives us 2 or 3 weeks of more chances for escalation. Like I said, just an hour or two ago, there were these reports that Iran hit a fully laden tanker in the Dubai port. What happens if the United States in these next 2-3 weeks, because Trump feels like he needs to get the Iranians to give him some kind of better deal, takes Karg Island? Or if the Israelis decide we don't like that this war is ending, we're going to start hitting crazy shit that you hadn't even imagined we were going to hit before. And then Iran starts hitting more energy infrastructure and we start escalating. So it seems to me the best case scenario, like I said, is the Ayatollahs control the Strait of Hormuz. And the worst case scenario is global economic catastrophe worse than the COVID-19 disruption because we're in an escalation ladder that neither the United States and Iran are going to get out of, at least for the next 2-3 weeks. Do you see a door C? Do you see any nuance here? Because I'm increasingly seeing less nuance and being like, those are the two options. And of course, Trump has to choose number A, and he has to somehow, to your point, put lipstick on the pig and say, this is what I meant. This is what I wanted to do the whole time. I got rid of the nukes. The rest of the world can figure this shit out. NATO, you suck. Come at me.
I mean, look, but he objectively did say that. It was President Trump himself who decided that his initial war aims were not good enough.
Yeah.
Like regime change.
His war aims change all over the place, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I know, but like day one, this was about, degrading missiles, drones, proxies, Navy, nuclear. Proxy was, that was Marco Rubio's statement, like day one of the war. That was like
Oh, yeah. I agree with you. It was little Marco's statement the entire time. It was not Trump's statement the whole time. Trump has been all over the place.
He has been all over the place, but again, my point is that it was the appetite grew because it looked like it was awesome, and then the appetite is now going to go back to the original. So, anyways, it doesn't really matter. Like the point is, I think there is a third scenario. Like I think so. I think there's a scenario where the war lasts a decade, but oil flows. I've said that before on our podcast. I think people are really, really forgetting that for 80 years, Middle East has had constant warfare, and yet oil has flowed.
Mhm.
So, like this is why Frank Herbert in Dune created the exact same scenario where there's constant warfare over Iraqis, but the spice flows. Because Dune is literally just transposed from our world to the science fiction world. And so, like, this is not supernatural. It's not a product of astrology. It's not a product of magic. It is impossible to arrest and abrogate flow of energy out of the Middle East forever, because then you will make too many enemies. And you yourself, all of these are petrol states. So this is where I think there is an alternative where, oil and other commodities increasingly are shipped out of Hormuz, even as Iran, Israel, and maybe even the US in a much more limited capacity. Occasional fighter jet continue the war. So I don't know if we need an actual moment when there's de-escalation. I'm not sure that we need a moment when there's actual, oh, look, there's the truce. And, to everyone listening to this and thinking they're crazy, that I'm crazy, markets in the global economy moved away from Russia, Ukraine. The war is still going on. People are still dying. Markets in the economy moved away from COVID. People were still dying of COVID. I'm assuming people are dying of COVID. The last two calamities we have had from a global markets perspective, from a global economic perspective, from a geopolitical pandemic perspective, they both ended being calamities before an official announcement. So in February of 2022, people seriously contemplated that Russia would use nuclear weapons. There was serious questioning of where would they stop? Would it be the Dnieper? Would it be borders of Ukraine with Poland? Would it be somewhere else? Nobody's questioning those points anymore. Nobody's walking the streets of Warsaw, afraid for their life. They're obviously, filled with anguish and sadness for the Ukrainian people. But my point is that all of these calamities over the last 5 years effectively ended without being over. And that would be a third scenario I would add, where we don't have a resolution or a reacceleration of geopolitical conflict, but instead we just kind of have a war, particularly between Iran and Israel, because I don't see how the two of them ever make a deal. And yet somehow energy does continue to go through Hormuz. And by the way, we've seen a pickup in traffic. It's very minor. It's very minor. And everybody who thinks the world's going to end is going to point out that it's nowhere near the pre-war shipping levels. But that's how these things start. a star where the second derivative turns positive, and it has.
That's true, but things have to continue along this path, and there's a very real
For sure.
scenario. I mean, I'm having these flashbacks, and this is maybe going to bias me a little bit because I remember vividly. It was one of the first moments I was relevant in the Strat 4 analyst room. It was towards the middle of the opening salvo of the Arab Spring, and everybody said Hosni Mubarak, the former dictator of Egypt, was about to resign, and I was this lowly. ADP, basically an intern in the corner, being like, there's no way Mubarak is about to resign. And he was supposed to give a speech. It was going to be like 4 p.m. Central Time. So we all huddled in this cubicle and everybody was like, all right, he's going to resign. We got to have the piece ready. And I was like, I'm telling you guys, he's not going to resign. There is no way on God's green earth that Hosni Mubarak is just going to be like, cool, I'm out. I'm listening to the protesters. And he got up there in that really deep voice. It's even deeper than mine. I can't even mimic it. I wish I could. And he basically said, I am the grandfather of the Egyptian nation. I am not going anywhere. Egypt is mine. Come at me, bro. And everybody was like, oh, Jacob, great. Go get us some coffee. We got to write a new piece. And I was like, great. I'll go get you the coffee, knuckleheads. Point being, like, grandfather of the American nation, Donald Trump, might be coming out tonight. I'm not dismissing the fact that he might come on air and be like, the Iranians have not met my terms. I thought we had good negotiators, but we didn't have good negotiators. We are now going to be escalating by telling the Marines to seize Karg Island, and I will be destroying some energy infrastructure, and maybe then they'll finally come to the table. And then we're off to the races. Then the little bit of increase that we've seen in traffic is gone, and we start
For
going
sure.
up the escalation window, and you get that kind of hysteria. Like, what is that, 30% chance, 40% chance? I don't know how to put a probability on it, but like, it's not at all clear to me that that's not the direction that this is going.
Oh, 100%.
Especially because he keeps leaking that the war is going to go on for 2 to 3 more weeks. Like, what does that mean, the war is going to go on for 2 or 3 more weeks? I think if you turn on Hormuz today, cool, like maybe we can avert catastrophe. 2-3 weeks, they're already talking about shortages in East Asia.
Well, it's
Maybe
okay.
I'm
No, look,
freaking out
shortages
unnecessarily.
are fine if you know that they're going to be solved. So that's the first thing I would say. I think a lot of people who are short right now, like in terms of equity markets, and who are long oil, I think what they don't understand, I mean, not that I'm disagreeing with that position. I still retain a long oil position, but I think there's a real misunderstanding that, like, yes, things can get very, very bad, but if they're being resolved, the global economy, global consumers, global investors are going to look through the valley of supply loss. As long as we know that on the other side of the valley is, the plateau, you're going to get out of the valley. So just keep that in mind. Like, if this situation lasts 2 to 3 weeks, but President Trump is very definitive that it's 2 to 3 weeks and there is no ground troops, it's okay if some factory in Shenzhen or Taipei gets shut down. It really is. Even if it's semiconductor factory, like, the life will go on. Uh, the concern is what you said first. It's not so much that it's going to last 2 to 3 weeks. It's that in those 2 to 3 weeks, there's ground force incursion in one of the islands that the Iranians like consider like critical, and then they retaliate against energy. Like, that's where, even if you assign like a 35% probability to that outcome, which you seem to be assigning because you're like between 30 and 40% probability we go that route. The problem with that is that it's like blood red. If you've got the green outcome on one side, like, oh, there's 60% probability of some sort of a de-escalation. What do you do? Do you go long? Do you say to yourself, well, everything is going to be fine? And my answer is no. Even if your base case is okay, the problem is that the downside is not linearly worse. It's much worse. It's non-linearly worse. The
Mhm.
35% that you're worried about, Jacob, that's like we talked about last time, Mad Max, canisters of gasoline, cannibalism. Like, that's where we are. And like, and that's the problem. That's the problem right now. It's very difficult to be optimistic. Even if I were to tell you, no way, Jacob, no way. The probability is 20% or 15% that President Trump thinks that 8,000 special forces are good enough to do something. It would be very dangerous. I mean, he's flirting with Jimmy Carter Operation Eagle Claw 2.0 disaster, I think. I would advise him. if I were talking to him in a cabinet, I would be like, look, I'm not touching this with a, with a pole shorter than 600,000 troops. Like, sorry. So, if he disagrees with me and goes in, and the probability of that is 20%, again, the problem with that 20%, even though it sounds low to people listening to this, the outcome is so negative that the other 80% almost doesn't matter.
What's your probability on that scenario?
I'm exactly the same as you are,
Oh
actually.
man.
We like nailed it. I think 65% probability of some form of de-escalation that can actually look like continued warfare for the next 10 years, but oil flows.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried that it looks like continuous warfare for the next 10 years. I think what it looks like is that Iran has a tolling mechanism on the Strait of
Why are you
Hormuz,
worried
and I
about
think
that?
the prop well, I'm worried about that because Iran has opened Pandora's box or closed Pandora's box, if you like. They have shown that they can stop shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. So now that they've done it, now that they've ripped off the band-aid, and now that they have the tolling, not infrastructure, but they're going to start tolling through the Strait of Hormuz, and that's going to be the new normal, then they can shut down the strait whenever they want. If Israel doesn't withdraw from southern Lebanon, okay, we're shutting down the strait. If Israel does something against the Houthis, okay, we're shutting down the strait. Or can Iran be selective and say, you know what? We got into another spat with Pakistan on our border. No Pakistani ships will be allowed through the Strait of Hormuz until Pakistan does what we want. And maybe a stray rocket or missile something hits a Pakistani ship that tries to make a run through, and then something blows up. Just what the market wants. I think you're exactly right. It doesn't matter whether it's the United States Navy policing global choke points, or whether it's the Ayatollahs with their toll, asking for however many million yuan for you to go through. What the market needs is predictability, some level of certainty. And it just seems to me like there's a version of the tolling scenario that is certainty. There's a version of continuous war, but ships can go through the Strait of Hormuz. That's like the tanker war. There's also a version of this though where Iran is emboldened and says more like in Dune, "Hey, we control this now. So if you want to mess with us, if you want to get through here, you need to pay the toll. Otherwise, you're not getting through." And that's not certainty. Like that
That's
that's a
certain.
great deal of uncertainty, no? It's
No,
uncertain certainty, certain
so
uncertainty, I don't
so
know.
why did they not like, I don't understand how tolling I would argue that getting ships to go through Hormuz and making money off of them increases the likelihood that Iran does not ever again shut down the Strait of Hormuz, because now they're not only incentivizing potential buildup of alternatives, they're not only incentivizing potential efforts by the world to interdict their interdiction efforts, but it's also going to hurt their pocketbook. So, in other words, what I would ask you is to kind of think in terms of first principles. Why didn't Iran do this in the past? It's not like they didn't know they could do this. It's not like this is my problem with President Trump's thinking here. He started off this entire thing by saying no one in 47 years has ever attempted this. If you ever say that about anything, you should pause. I think only President Trump and his advisors are surprised that Iran did what they did. This has always been something that Iran could do. And that's why, on one hand, I'm making fun of the administration. On the other hand, I'm undermining the logic behind your fear that Iran is somehow emboldened in using Strait of Hormuz over Israel, over Pakistan. There are costs to doing what they just did. But they did it because somebody threatened the regime. And so, like, as
Right.
long as you don't threaten the regime in the future, they're not gonna do this because they haven't done it. They haven't done it even when the regime was far more threatened in the Iran-Iraq war, which is like it's like the NFL game compared to, like, a bunch of elementary kids playing touch football. Like, that's how much more like, serious that was as a threat to the regime. So, Iran has never done this in the past. I don't I'm comfortable with them putting a tolling system. I think it will actually make them less likely to do the scenario you described.
I think probably, but that's where there's something beyond just the U.S. as an actor here. For example, let's talk about Israel. I know that the United States was able to get Israel to stop the fighting, last year.
Right.
But Netanyahu, by the way, I was trying to shift my analysis on Israel because I think my emotion has been clouding my analysis on Israel. I was trying to. I sat with myself yesterday and I was like, what if Netanyahu's right? what if Israel is a great power? What if, like, yes, I can say in the long run that this is going to cause Israel to collapse because of internal and dissension because they're overrun. But even if you look back at like the Jewish polities in this part of the world, they lasted for hundreds of years. And this particular one has nuclear weapons. So what if there is a greater Israeli empire that is emerging? So that's one point. But second point is, let's say Trump wants to taco. He's willing to make this deal. He lets the Ayatollahs toll to their heart's desire. And Netanyahu is like, no thanks. Actually, south of the Litani River is not enough for me. I'm going to go all the way to Beirut to get these Hezbollah guys, or I'm going to keep hitting whatever targets I want inside of Iran because Iran is weakened. And then Iran says, okay, empty deal. We're closing the strait until you can get Israel back on side. Like one example. Or the UAE, who seems to be pushing the Trump administration to not leave a wounded Iran in charge of the Strait of Hormuz and wants the United States to finish the job, whatever the heck that means. Is it then the Houthis go after the Red Sea and boom, the toll, or the straits close because Iran wants to shut it down? I mean, I can imagine scenarios in which Iran, having now realized that they have this leverage and that the U.S. Navy cannot praying mantis them like they did in '88, say, okay, fine, we will use this. And to your point, they never used it before because I don't know. I would push back against this notion that Iran-Iraq war was more of a existential threat to the regime, and
Oh,
also that the
that's
target was not.
mathematically impossible.
No. But there was also a war against Saddam and Iraq. So yes, like the United
Uh,
States was kind of playing all sides there, or whatever. But
no,
this
it
is
wasn't.
the great Satan and the little Satan teaming up and pummeling you with everything, rather than
They're not
antiquated
pummeling
land
you with
wars.
anything. That
Sure,
like
they are with everything.
no, they're not.
They're not
No, it's a
with everything they
joke.
got.
No, not at all.
What's
Not
a
at
joke?
all. I mean, absolutely not. First of all, Israel doesn't have a lot. An F-35 and F-16 cannot do strategic bombing. They don't have the
Yeah,
payload. The US has not used B-52s or mother of all bombs, Moabs. Like there's
but yeah,
all
that's
sorts of things. So like, look, first of all, they're not doing everything they got. So whenever whenever I start talking to somebody about US Iran game theory, everybody always, the immediate question, Jacob, is what you just did. Introduce Israel. And it's like, aha, got you. What about Israel? And I'm like, well, what about China? What about India? What about Pakistan? And so what do I mean by that? I mean that if Iran starts using the lever of Strait of Hormuz because Israel is going to invade and annex Lebanon north of the Litani River, like Beijing is going to knock on Tehran's door and be like, bro, all right. Like when America starts using the R word, okay, regime change, all right, we get it. We get it. We all have to basically deal with you using your sword of Damocles, which is the Strait of Hormuz. But like, bro, like I don't care where Israel ends or starts. So this is why if we introduce Israel into the game, the neat two-player game theory, we then need to introduce everybody else. And my view is that there's absolutely no difference between today and the Iran-Iraq war, except that the Iran-Iraq war was far more existentially threatening to Iran. I mean, first of all, like let's just pump the brakes on how bad of a situation this is. Millions of people die. Millions. Now, okay, I mean, you could argue this is early going, buddy. But Israel with F-35s is not going to kill millions of Iranians. Iran-Iraq war, Iraq was a proxy of the United States of America. Everybody knew it, financed by the Gulf petrostates that attacked Iran that was far less comfortable with itself. This is 1980. This is like mere months into the Islamic Revolution. And they did dabble with closing the straits. But the point is that it's very difficult for them to do that and not incur the wrath of the entire planet and not just the West. In fact, other than Europe and its LNG imports from Qatar, it's really the non-aligned countries like India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Southeast Asia and Japan and South Korea. Okay, those are not really non-aligned. They're American allies, but on this issue, they don't have a horse in this race. And then finally, China. So you're basically saying that Iran is going to risk the ire of the entire planet because of where they think, like Israel should land on Lebanon. So I actually see a completely opposite view. I think that Israel-Iran enmity is a convenient theater of war where we can sequester today's violence into. I think that
Hmm.
this is like a safe space for Iranians and Israelis to kill each other while the rest of us enjoy the fruits of cheap energy. Like, that is where I think this ends. I don't think Israel and Iran ever find common ground. Certainly, they're not going to de escalate. I don't care. Like, once America says we're not seeking regime change, Tehran has to then be like, cool, let me start tolling the Strait of Hormuz so I can support Hezbollah and Hamas, against Israel with more money. And then they go back to what they've been doing in the past. If Iran says at that point, no, we also want Israel to withdraw from Lebanon, they're going to lose the patience of the rest of the world, the Chinas, the South Koreas, the Indias, the Pakistans. They're going to be like, bro, you and Israel have had a problem for like 8,000 years. You're not going to start using Hormuz in 2026 to resolve it. And so I don't think that's in the cards. I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
obviously I could be wrong.
No. I take your point. I think my scenario is not very good. And I think I'm conflating something actually now that I think about it. I think that I'm conflating the notion that we can get to this scenario where the spice is flowing and Iran is in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. Like, can we get to that peaceful outcome with Israel continuing to push in
Yes.
southern Lebanon? And maybe we can. But like one of the Iranian demands here has been no, Israel needs to stop and needs to go back.
Yeah, one of
So
my
that's at least
demands
like
is to have a
one of
six
the
pack. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
and yeah, no, I mean you can. That's achievable for you.
well, I mean, I guess it's
It's not
achievable
achievable for
for
the Iranian.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, look, um, yeah, I just don't care
Well,
what
no,
they
so,
say.
no. I hear
You
you.
know?
I think I'm conflating, and I think Israel has to do something. Like Iran has to see Israel do something in order to agree to some type of settlement here. But
No,
I think the
I
no,
don't
you
think
don't
so.
think that at all.
No, I
Well,
think
I don't know.
I don't think look, like Iran is adding stuff to the list so that they can ignore it when the deal is made eventually. And I mean, like, they're going to interdict Indian and Chinese oil because of Lebanese sovereignty. You have so much faith in Iranian, like, objective
Not
normative compass.
no, not Lebanese sovereignty, but to save their last remaining proxy in the Levant from
Yeah.
certain destruction. Like
Well,
maybe.
those guys will just go more north. They'll go to parts of Syria that are not controlled by our friendly Al Qaeda terrorists. Like,
Well,
look,
and Israel's going to go there too. Like Israel has not been afraid. Like this greater Israel thing is like it's a
it's
real thing.
Israel. Yeah, look, it is real. You see that? You see what I did that? Oh,
That's
blooms. No,
beautiful.
but look, like, I think I just don't trust the Iranians when they say that they're doing this for Hezbollah or for Lebanese. Like, I think that they found, like, as we would say in Serbian, their spoon fell into honey. And what by which I mean, Americans have effectively, by not properly staffing and supplying this mission, they have allowed Iran to have an acceptable reaction. Like, it's not acceptable to President Trump. It's not acceptable. But from a global perspective, I think everybody is like, yeah, well, like, what did you expect them to do when you kill the head of state? Okay.
Yeah.
But what's not acceptable to India and China and Pakistan, and I'm purposefully pointing these countries, they're not Western. They're not enemies of Iran. Some are friends, some are acquaintances, some are allies. They're going to say, like, bro, we don't care what Israel's doing in Lebanon. Nobody cares. And Iran will be like, well, I care. And India and China will be like, well, I don't. So give me my oil. Now, what Iran might do is the bullshit Houthi mechanism by which you pretend to still be blocking shipping in the Red Sea by targeting Israeli ships. And it's like, who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody on the planet cares. I mean, Israelis care, God bless them, but like nobody else cares. And I'm sure that Iran will, out of solidarity with its Lebanese, like, brethren, the Shia brethren, Hezbollah, will say something like, yeah, we will make sure that no crude out of the Persian Gulf gets to Israel. All right, cool. But I don't see them blocking the shipping of 3 billion people. Like, you're talking China and India together, like almost 3 billion human beings are going to suffer because of what Israel's doing to Hezbollah. No fucking way. I mean, I'm going to say that right now. Iran has a trade deficit with China. which is fascinating because it's their third largest supplier of crude. Do you know how much shit Iran has to buy from China to have a deficit with them? It's buying everything that makes Iran a sophisticated modern economy. Like the drones have semiconductors in them. They're not making those in Iranian fabs. So like yeah, like countries like India and China have immense leverage and while they may have sympathy and they may have patience with Iran today, I don't think they would in the scenario you're describing. Like if they start using this as a, willy-nilly closing the straits because of like, well, Israel invaded Hezbollah. Well,
No,
the
no,
new government of
I'm,
Syria.
I hear. I'm going to grant the Israel point. What about our friends in the Emirates or in Saudi Arabia? Because at least according to the reporting that I'm reading, they're not cool with this. They don't want a weakened Iran that is emboldened that gets to toll things through the Strait of Hormuz. They are pushing the United States to go further. The UAE is even talking about deploying their own
Yeah,
resources, which I'd love to see that, just from a theatrical point of view. Um,
yeah,
they have to be on board too, and they also have some say here because the Chinese, the Indians, the Pakistanis, they're getting a lot of their oil from the Saudis and from the Emiratis. So,
sure.
like, what if they're not on board here? Maybe that's a better spoiling role to talk about what we're getting.
I mean, I think it would require the US not to abandon him tonight at like, what is it, 8 p.m. Eastern,
9 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, yeah.
9 p.m. Eastern? Okay, so depending on what President Trump says, I mean, I think that Saudi Arabia and UAE are not going to fight it out with Iran, So look, I think there's a scenario. Here's a better scenario for what you're trying to achieve, right? I think that it would require Iran to be in certain state of failed stateness, which is a mouthful. And if we don't know who's in charge and Iran doesn't know who's in charge, then perhaps, yes, you could have factions of the government on occasion shoot a rocket at a VLCC, a very large crude carrier carrying a lot of crude out of the Hormuz. I think that would be, like if Iran is not a coherent state and we've now granted that state, we've all granted them the role of a tollkeeper, then yeah, that would be more likely than I think these other scenarios. Because again, if we're going to introduce Iran or UAE or Saudi Arabia into the game theory, then you have to grant the 3 billion people that actually get crude out of the Middle East, which is India and Saudi Arabia. You have to grant the Taiwanese and the South Koreans who use the helium in the fabs. And this
Mhm.
is why it's so difficult to interdict this. This is why Paul Atreides threatens to nuke the spice fields, but doesn't. But because he needs the spice to finance his jihad, but also because he knows that the moment he does that, it's game over. Like he and his Fremens will be obliterated themselves by the other houses because what's the point then? Fuck it. Like we don't need Iraqis. We're all going to die. We'll never have interstellar space travel. So fuck it. And everybody who's listening to this who is not a fan of Dune is just like, what are these people on? And in your
We're on the
case,
spice.
for you, please join the revolution and watch the villain of absolute art form that is Dune 1 and Dune 2. Thank you. But the point is that that's the conundrum of Iran. You can abuse your leverage. And this is what I find so fascinating, Jacob. I think you're falling into the trap of many others, which is that there's this view that the leverage cannot run out. At some point you can abuse it. You can get on the nerves of if you have leverage over your parents, and you're constantly playing your mom versus your dad, eventually you will piss both of them and they're going to be like, no, we're not on the same page. And now you are screwed and you've burned through your leverage because you've united us. And yeah, I do see a scenario, as I've said before in this podcast, where Chinese naval vessels are shoulder to shoulder with American. Do you want to bring that about if you're Iran?
Yeah, I mean, I would push back against that, but I hear what you're saying, and I actually think you're right, and I think the thing that is really notable for listeners to take away in what we're saying is that the best case scenario here is that Iran is in full control of the Strait of Hormuz and charges
Yeah.
for passage through the Strait of Hormuz, and that, by the way, is seen by the world as better than the U.S. Navy
Can we
guaranteeing
pause and talk
maritime
about that?
access through choke points. I mean, that's like the biggest thing, right? Um, yeah, let's well, but before we pause and talk about that, I just want to say in response to what you just said, I can imagine that, and I think that's probably where things are going. That's my 65%. I just think there are a couple stumbling blocks from where we are here to where we're going, and I don't think President Trump is in control of any of those stumbling blocks. I mentioned Israel. I think you did a good job of weakening that, although I think Israel can do some things that will cause problems with the situation. But the Saudis and the Emiratis also have to be on board with this a little bit, because I think they absolutely would hold up oil exports for 3 billion people. They don't give a crap at all. They know that they have all the leverage, and they'll say, absolutely not. We are not going to have the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian control going forward. No oil from us. Yanbu shut down. Everything from Qatar, like shut down. We are not going to. So then maybe you get some kind of deal where it's like Iran and
Mm.
Oman and they share the tolls 50%. I don't know, but they have to agree to that before you get to the upland sunlit pastures of Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But like I agree with you that that is the direction that we're going here, and that it's remarkable that that's the best case scenario.
It's remarkable. I mean, like, did we not study that the foundation of American hegemony is control of the seas? Right? I mean, and this is why I wanted us to pause and like just because you and I are kind of like disagreeing on scenarios. So sorry, what was that? You're holding up a book. Oh, Mahan, yes. Yes. Yeah, Alfred Mahan, which is the foundation of kind of American geopolitical imperatives, if there is a such a thing. And President Trump is abrogating them. Now, in a way, it is consistent with his, I think, vision. And what I mean by that is that United States of America, once it recognizes the world is multipolar and other countries are not just going to abide by its hegemony, like I've always argued, why then maintain that hegemony? And so instead, why not use quick, vicious bursts of violence in which to get what you want? And I think that what's interesting to me, Jacob, is that Venezuela was an awesome success. Iran is not. And people are trying to say that the two of them are disparate in the logic behind them. But why can't we just say that, like, the logic is the same? Is just one of them was a 3-point shot buzzer beater and to win the game, the other one was a miss. So I don't think there's anything inconsistent. Both of those were very clearly not long drawn out engagements. I think if President Trump tacos tonight and withdraws and declares victory and all this stuff, it is perfectly consistent. He just didn't execute. One was executed brilliantly. The other one was executed poorly. Like there's no logical inconsistency. And in that lies this withdrawal from hegemonic functions. If the world is not unipolar, if I'm not a hegemon, why am I keeping the Straits of Hormuz open? You know, why? Why am I wasting my resources? Why not just withdraw the Fifth Fleet from Bahrain at that point? And why not withdraw the Air Force from Qatar? Like it is consistent with kind of everything we've seen. And I will argue that it's beneficial for the region. But I'm going to pause and see what you think. But let's also come back because I actually think, not that I think that Iran charging a toll is beneficial necessarily. I mean, Iran as a regime will not get more money. But more, I think that if the US were to fully extract itself from the Middle East, and that also does mean the support for Israel in some shape, way, or form, I think it would be more beneficial for the region. Not
Yeah.
completely withdraw all support for Israel. Just some basic level of protection US has to has to provide Israel. But, I think that the region would be better served because in some ways I feel like well, not feel like I believe the US is almost like a central bank flooding the zone with liquidity like QE, like quantitative easing, geopolitical quantitative easing, which has allowed various inefficiencies to be not resolved. And once the US withdraws, a geopolitical QT for those of you who are finance bros, what ends up happening is that the individual players in the region themselves have to find an equilibrium. And your point was like, how does Saudi Arabia deal with Iran having a toll? Yeah. Yeah. You know what? That is something they're going to have to resolve on their own.
Yeah, you know what's going to happen? Iran's going to win. Because they're a civilizational nation state that has had empires in this part of the world for many thousands of years, and the Saudis are not.
Oh,
I
man,
have
I
a
don't
ton
know
of
about
things.
that. Saudi Arabia
Oh,
did spread Islam as the second largest religion in the world. So, like, I
oh,
mean, I don't
oh,
know.
oh, please! They relocated the caliphate to Damascus as soon as they possibly could. Like they were not ruling from the Arabian Peninsula. Once they managed to convert everybody and moved out, they quickly moved to Damascus and to these other places.
Mecca still in
And
Hijaz, but fine, fine,
yeah,
fine.
yeah, fine. That's cool. Also, like they weren't the ones fighting Sparta, right? Like we're not going back to nomads from the Arabian
I mean,
Peninsula
that's a
coming
good
to
counter.
Sparta.
I will give you that is a very that's a fine counter. Yes.
Yeah, they didn't even have
Although you
like
know what, like,
literacy
man,
back then.
Iran could end up like Greece too. You know what I mean? So like, let's.
I mean, yeah, that would. I hope that President Trump shows. I hope he doesn't even have a speech. I hope he shows up with a taco salad on the what is it, the Resolute desk or whatever. He's just eating it, and he's like, "I'm here. I'm ready to eat the
Or
tacos."
it'd be funny if he
Um,
like the camera pans to him and he's finishing a taco. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and just puts it away. Like, "Oh, you caught me here. Oh, hello."
that's television. Okay, I have a couple things I want to say here.
Shoot.
The first is it's your TDSDS is clocking in, and
Oh,
I'm like
fair.
most of the way there with you. The problem is for what you talked about to make sense, you have to before you do this, you have to create enough capacity inside the United States to take the place of this, because all these idiots who are coming to me saying, "Oh, we don't import oil or LNG from the
Mm,
Persian Gulf. We're fine." Okay, fine. But you remember all the critical minerals and resources we don't refine and process in the United States anymore? You remember all these feedstocks and inputs and the global economy that we're a
yep.
part of? The price of plastic has just doubled. Okay, just the packaging at the grocery store is going to
We're in
double on you because of
violent
the
agreement.
yeah. But so if
Violent.
you're going to do what you're talking about here, what you need is at least 12 months of Operation Warp Speed mega industrial policy to get the United States in shape to pick up the slack. You're not even the United States and its allies.
All right,
Instead,
Jacob. And even then, you
yeah,
wouldn't
go
be
ahead.
able to do it. But sorry, go ahead.
No, but at least then you would have the impetus. You could see the strategic logic. These comments about it's short term pain for long term benefit. Okay, at least I can like start to divine the strategy. Instead, what did we do? We're on the anniversary of Liberation Day. We did a bunch of moronic illegal tariffs. And Trump literally thought in his brain, if I do tariffs, I can get rid of income taxes, I can get rid of the debt, and people will make things in America again. Newsflash, nobody's making shit in America again. Okay. They're all still sourcing things from China or from parts of East Asia. And these are the places that we're getting things. And these countries are dependent on the Middle East going forward. So I'm with you to a point. If this was all some part of some great grand economic strategy, okay. But you needed industrial policy. Ironically, you needed Trump's foreign policy married with Joe Biden's domestic policy. And then maybe you have something that makes sense to me. But to do tariffs for the last 12 months, to mess up all of those different things and to not support US industry in the way, and then to go after this particular thing, like it just kind of rings hollow. The second thing, withdrawal from hegemonic responsibilities. Okay, did we really have to use up 800 tomahawks and spend 200 billion and everything else to do this? Could we not have just decapitated the leadership, told the Israelis to spend the money and gotten out of it? It seems to me that there are lower cost ways to do that. Um, Two more things. The is it beneficial for the region? Depends who in the region. I don't think it's beneficial for the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, Kuwait. Not at all. Is it beneficial for Iran? Sure. It's really beneficial, I think, for your Indias and your Pakistans and your China. If they no longer have to worry about sanctions, if they can go trade with who they want to in the Middle East and deal with Iran on their own terms rather than being afraid of the United States, that's great for them. And that's probably net better for the global economy. I'm not so sure it's great for these sheikhs in the middle of the desert who convinced themselves that they were the future and captains of technology and industry, when really, really, they're just guardians of oil the rest of the world wants. And then lastly, and then come in wherever you want here, I'm remiss at having not brought this up yet at minute 48, and I should have brought it up a little bit earlier. This also intersects with the Russia Ukraine war in a meaningful way because Zelensky has been hitting Russian oil export infrastructure. He's been
Yeah.
hitting the Russian petrochem
Well
industry.
done. Yeah.
He's going around the Middle East to the Saudis and the Emiratis saying, "Hey, I've got drone technology." I don't know if you saw this just before we jumped on. Iran, this is really cute. They apparently, in a letter addressed to the UN Secretary General, accused Ukraine of getting involved in an active role with the Iran conflict now part of the Russia-Ukraine proxy war. I mean, it's cute to me that they're going to the UN, but which is to say, like, if we're getting rid of, or if we're trying to actually paint the game theory picture here, now Ukraine and Russia are also on the board, and Ukraine is maybe hanging out with the Gulf countries, and maybe Russia is supporting Iran, and maybe Russia wants higher price for oil, but then Ukraine has to hit Russian energy infrastructure, and now we're talking about the type of conflict that I wasn't so worried about in a multipolar world. I always said in multipolar worlds, conflicts were localized. They wouldn't go past borders. And now we've got two different conflicts that are maybe starting to intersect with each other and the
Yeah.
energy trade and everything else.
Uh,
So I wax a little too long there, but take it where.
no, no, no. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm just going to focus on one thing, which is like, well, like geopolitical power is just as, oil is fungible, so is power. So is power. And what that means is that US doesn't want to guard the Strait of Hormuz anymore, but you better believe it can shut it down much better than Iran can. And so it's not like, what I mean by that is like US, see, this is where I disagree that the US should have planned for this by building its domestic helium production. No, because this
Oh,
isn't like this isn't
we're
resolved because this is resolved because everybody needs helium. You know what I mean? Everybody needs it. This is resolved because everybody needs LNG. This is resolved because everybody needs everything. And all the US is saying to China, in fact, and you and I have joked on this podcast before. I've said years ago when we started this podcast that if you're a US taxpayer, you are ensuring the security of Chinese energy supplies. And so I think what's happened, like I said that on our pod, I don't know how many, 18 months ago, 24 months ago. I've been making fun of that for 5 years now with my clients in public speeches. When somebody says, like, it's all about China, I'm like, well, actually, no, as an American, you are paying taxes. So China gets a barrel of oil from the Middle East. I didn't mean that as like that should end. My point is that the United States doesn't need to build all these supplies somewhere else. It's going to get them. Why? It's just gonna be China that's gonna secure them, and no, they're not gonna secure them and then take them, because there's only so much supply they can get, like, they're already getting like, this isn't a zero-sum game. A phosphate out of Jordan, China's not gonna hoard it. It's gonna go somewhere where it's gonna go, like, where it's needed. Somebody else is just going to make sure that that transit goes through, and that's where I think that if the US were to abrogate its role in the Strait of Hormuz, I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that it could have been done maybe more casually, maybe more intentionally, rather than in the middle of a crisis where you kind of look like you're abandoning your friends. But the fact that it happens, why does it matter? Like if instead of US it's China that now controls the straits, the funny thing about that is the US can come back and just shut down the straits. It has the military capability to do that. So it's, like the world won't be changed that much.
but we don't want the strait shut down. Like the strait being shut down is an economic catastrophe.
Yeah, but nobody else does. That's my point. Like nobody else does, including Iranians who are now, God bless them, figure out a way to make money out of it. And so if you're the United States of America, why continue to hold a military presence in the region? Like, okay, so Iran now gets something, whereas before it didn't. But there's India, there's Pakistan, there is Malaysia, there are China, there's South Korea, there's Japan, there's Taiwan. It's in everybody's interest that it's open, other than Russia and Norway, and maybe Canada. The three countries that could maybe benefit from Strait of Hormuz being shut. Other than
Yeah,
them,
but this, I think this goes back to the centrality of the Sunni Arabs in the region, which is, I mean, I know like the Dune comparisons are overwrought, but the Fremen are really the Arabs, not the Iranians. And
yeah,
so, like
fair.
at that point, like if the United States pulls out all of its military infrastructure and everything from the Middle East, which cool, I've been waiting for Trump to do that. He campaigned on that in Trump 1.0, and he's never done it. But
Iran
if
will
they
not.
do that,
Yeah, no, they're not
then
gonna. I'm not worried about UAE or Saudi Arabia at all. This is where I completely disagree with you. First of all,
if the United States pulls back completely and no longer cares if they're there, they don't have
first,
to worry about it tomorrow because they're in a much relatively powerful position. But if
yes.
Iran gets to just get a bunch of money, and if China's going to rebuild Iran 10,
Why would
15 years
China?
from now,
Oh, but pump the brakes on that. Why would China put all of its eggs in one basket? And I think this is American propaganda at work, Jacob. I
I'm not
think
saying
you
all in the basket. I'm just saying China sees a
no,
rebuilding opportunity.
no, no,
U.S.
no.
contractors would like that opportunity. I'm sure the French would love it too. Everybody wants to rebuild.
China's not Iran's ally.
Of
Like
course not. I'm just saying they want to rebuild some infrastructure for a cost.
no, but what I'm
Instead of
saying,
instead of taking the toll from us, let us export some of our construction know-how to your country, and we get to not pay the toll.
what I'm saying is that Sunni Arab states in the Middle East are not allied with America because of love, but because of geopolitical mathematics. There's absolutely no world in which great powers of the world, the great houses, the great families, India, China, America. Okay, fine. America's now out because they don't want to play anymore. No one's going to be cool with Iran dominating the Middle East. Like that's been the case since the end of the Ottoman Empire. And again, this is where I really, really stress this. It's not supernatural. It's not astrology, guys. The fact that oil transits through the Strait of Hormuz throughout the last 80 years, the fact that nobody has been allowed to dominate the Middle East, not the Arab nationalists, not the Islamists, not the whateverists, whoever shows up in the Middle East and is like, I want to unite all the people who happen to speak the same language and believe in the same God. Like that hasn't happened since 1918 in the Middle East for a reason. And it's not American reason. It's not an Anglo-Saxon reason. It's a geopolitical math reason. In other words, there's a bunch of shit everybody wants. No one's going to allow one country, one leader, one ideology to dominate it. So I'm not worried about Saudi Arabia and UAE at all. They're going to find another military ally like that. I'm snapping my fingers for those of you who can't hear it. So China will very quickly, this is the irony of this. The irony here is that China will immediately become United States of America over the last 60 years. They're going to fit into this like a glove if the US were to withdraw. Now, the danger to the United States of America, the danger to the United States of America is that at some point, will China grow powerful enough to then abrogate phosphate or sulfur or whatever, helium exports? That we can talk about. But this idea that like Iran is going to run roughshod over Saudi Arabia and UAE ignores that it hasn't done that over the last 70 years, despite having a much greater military advantage over all of the regional countries. Over the like right now is probably the weakest Iran has ever been relative to these countries. And there's a reason for that, because no one will allow a single individual power to unite, just like no one will allow a single individual country to control the supply of the most important precious commodity in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Kissinger and Nixon thought that Iran could do that. And I mean, ironically, they thought that Iran could be the country that was their main partner in the Middle East in the context of the Cold War because they thought Iran would be more stable than the Gulf monarchies, which, by 79 turned out to be, Kissinger always gets the benefit for being this like super genius. He was the guy who with Nixon was trying to like support the Shah and support Iran as the chief U.S. ally in the region. So put that on his tab
Men
as well.
plan, Allah laughs. There you go.
Oh
Right?
yeah, there you go. Taking a Yiddish aphorism and putting it into the language of the Hijaz. I love it. But yeah, I hear you. I'm just saying that without U.S. security guarantees, without U.S. interest, I think the position of those Sunni states becomes pretty weak. You're right that they're going to have to go find some other security patron.
And
Maybe
my
it's
point is they
China,
will.
maybe it's Turkey, maybe it's a nuclear deterrent as quickly as possible. I'm just saying, like, is it beneficial for the region? I'm not so sure. I think it is beneficial for the rest of the world. I think the rest of the
Interesting.
world then gets cheaper and more reliable energy because you're not having to worry about the United States invading. Because if you look at recent history, the United States has invaded the Middle East once a
That's
decade for the past three
that's
to
kind
four
of
decades.
hilarious. That's kind of hilarious. That's the conclusion. But let me go back a little bit. The reason I think
Yeah.
it's beneficial for the region is that again, if you think about finance and you think about all these people who hate QE, I'm not one of them, by the way. I think central banks surging liquidity was important in 2009, 10, 11, maybe not 15, 16, 17. But the point is, when you overdo anything, when you overdo support and love for your kids, when you don't discipline them, when you
Yeah.
overdo the allowance you give your kids, when you overdo central bank liquidity in times of a crisis, what you create are disequilibria. And I think we have a disequilibria in the Middle East right now. And part of that disequilibria is that certain countries in the region, starting with Israel, but really, I mean, down the line, have kind of had a blank check in terms of their operations, and it creates disequilibria. It creates risk reward calculus that isn't properly like accounted for. It's not, and to your point, like we fear Israeli imperial overstretch, not because we worry about the future of Hezbollah, but because we worry about the future of Israel. Like imperial overstretch by Israel could happen. Like Netanyahu's out there talking about it's a global superpower.
Oh, it's happening.
So it's happening. Okay,
But it might happen for 100 years. That's the
fine.
shift I've been making in my mind.
That's fine. Yes. But like my point is that I think that when you think about America's role in the Middle East, it's created enemies and British before it and the French before it. This isn't about Israeli-Palestinian issues. This is just about the region in general. Um, the external interventions in the region have created a context in which the local players don't necessarily produce a stable equilibrium.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line that I'm saying. And so when I think why I do think it might be better for the region if the US took a back seat and China played like, and I'm not saying China is going to do a better job being a guarantor of peace and security, but a collection of countries, not just China, but everybody, including the US, provides a more collective but also a less intrusive role in stabilizing the region. It may have to force countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia to come to the table. And by the way, that's exactly what happened in 2022. In 2021, Iraq was about to descend into a civil war. The US was missing in action, completely missing in action. Both the Trump and the Biden administration were kind of like, meh, whatever. And it forced Saudi Arabia and Iran to sit down at the table. Now, in the Western media, it was reported that China played a crucial role. Whether it did or did not is irrelevant. I'm not making that point. I'm trying to make a point that Iran and Saudi Arabia actually sat down and had to negotiate because America was kind of missing in action, withdrawing from Afghanistan, allowing the domestic political situation in Iraq at the time to descend into civil war. It was the absence of external power that caused, I think, like allowed that part of the region to withstand the last 4 years of volatility. Now, of course, that's been abrogated. Why? Because of external involvement. The US came back to the party like, John Belushi at like Animal House, just like walking in, like, hey, let's have a party.
No, no, I like this take because it's very consistent with what you've been talking about for the last 12 months, which is a multipolar world can be a more peaceful, stable place because it's less about ideology. And the United States, and this is true, I think this is as true of Trump as it was of Bush, as it was of Biden. Like they're all neocons, and the United States has not been able to um, disaggregate its ideological problems in the region versus its straight power interests in the region. China doesn't care about anything except the spice flowing. The
Hmm.
United States' involvement in the region comes out of the Cold War. It is capitalism versus communism. The United States supports the Shah because it's worried that the other reactionary forces will embrace the Soviet Union. It trades back and forth between, they support Saddam at the beginning, but then there's Iran Contra, and then they're back and forth because this is all through a Cold War um, sort of Soviet lens. And once we got rid of the Cold War, it was okay, and now they're going to be liberal democracies and everything's going to be fine. And we continue to
Wisconsin.
use exactly we continue to use this language. It would be a lot better if China was just like, you know what, we really don't care. Just make sure the oil gets out, and otherwise, like we're not going to mess around with you. And the United States has not done that. But in our last 10 minutes, I don't want to let us go without because you haven't touched on the Russia Ukraine part yet, and
Oh,
this
yeah.
is the part that I'm like most not most. This concerns me. Like because I start to spiral into some of this hysteria that's out there because this breaks some of my priors. My priors was okay, Iran, Israel, the United States can hit each other, but this is going to stay a regional affair. Even when the Emiratis and the Qataris are involved, I'm like, okay, it's all the Persian Gulf. But now there's like, you're seeing direct overlap between the Russia Ukraine war and this war. And now it becomes something more to me, or we have the potential for second and third order effects that are really, really hard to predict. So what do you think about Ukraine's involvement here, about Russia's position here? Because it seems to me that they are increasingly relevant and that they could also play spoiler roles that maybe we're not appreciating.
It's interesting because I think Ukraine is one of the few countries on the planet that has figured out that in a multipolar world, there's no allies, there's no friends, there's no enemies, there's just interests. So Ukraine is actively working against European and American interests by attacking Russian oil export facilities. It's contributing to the increase in oil prices and saying, like, what? Fuck it. Like, let's go. And at the
Yeah,
same time, it's
President
just,
Trump, you said we had no cards. Here's
yeah, yeah.
one of our cards, Mr. Trump. We
And
have some.
and it's
What have
war
you got? What have you
profiteering.
got? Taco salad.
And it's war profiteering off of the need for drone interdiction. I don't think that this is like, how does it spread further? Does Russia invade Ukraine twice? Russia and Iran are in an alliance. They actually have an alliance, unlike Iran, China. That's just Western propaganda. They're not allies. China is not cool with what's going on. It's false that they are like happy. I mean, they are happy on some strategic level, but the only part of China's economy that's worked is exports, and they're about to lose all of them if the world goes into a recession. I mean, one of your second or third order effects of what's going on could be mass unemployment in China and potentially domestic unrest. So, I don't think China's like sitting there being like, oh, this is cool. So, Russia and Iran were allied before this conflict. They're going to continue to be allied. And all I see, like where you see some sort of like the wars fusing, all I see is Ukraine just, you know, correctly pursuing its own interests and quite frankly becoming a European power. I think, and this is something we talked about before. I have this concept of garrison states. I think states surrounded by war, surrounded by conflict, and in fact, in a state of conflict, quite often become extremely, they punch above their weight. Like South Korea is still in a state of war. South Korea has existed for the past 70 years with a constant threat of three-quarters of Seoul being destroyed. And no, not because North Korea has nukes. North Korea does not need nuclear weapons to destroy three-quarters of Seoul because it's within artillery range. And then you have, Israel as the obvious other example. I would argue West Germany during the Cold War was a garrison state as well. These are states that get access to cheaper financing, they get access to technology they would otherwise not get access to, and they have a esprit de corps that comes from having to fight for your survival. And I think Ukraine is just illustrating that. So that's what I see in this. I think Ukraine is becoming an actual European power, where I think that the EU should accelerate their membership, not because they're doing Ukraine a favor. Like, this is the probably top 5 largest standing army on the planet. Certainly, like, what, top 2, top 3 most veteran army on the planet? Probably top 1, top 2 in terms of modern technology, certainly. I mean, we know Americans know how to fight wars, I mean, clearly. But the kind of wars we're gonna be fighting in the future, Russia and Ukraine obviously know that more better than anyone. And on top of that, they have technological innovation. They're showing real geopolitical acumen. So I would say that what the takeaway is not that this is gonna become a world war. To me, the takeaway is that Ukraine is crushing it, actually, and that you are at we had a disagreement about Zelensky, like, a year
Yeah,
ago.
I loved him. I
Yeah,
thought he nailed it. I still think he nailed it.
and I think you're right. I think that, that's starting to actually reveal itself.
It's not necessarily, I mean, it's not, I don't see a world war scenario. It's just like, what if the endpoint of all this a month from now is okay, like stable spice flows out of the Persian Gulf with Iran tolling them for X amount of yuan, but
Mhm.
Russian oil exports go to zero because Ukraine embarks on a campaign like, what what Godfather Peter was talking about at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, that Russia wouldn't be able to export any oil. That hasn't come true. Like, Russia's been exporting oil. But so what if in a roundabout way, this conflict is what allows Zelensky to do that, and the United States either can't or won't stop it? And so 2 months from now, we are still in global economic crisis, not because the barrels aren't
Mhm.
flowing out of the Persian Gulf, but because Russian barrels are offline. And then Russia, in that state of desperation, what does it do? What does it conscience that it hasn't been able to conscience so far? Maybe there's other things. Like,
That's a great take.
that was more what I was.
That's a great take. I mean, which aligns with my view that Ukraine is just pursuing its own interests, right? And if you have the capability to completely shut down Russian exports, I mean, I'm sorry, but like Ukraine's got to do that. Ukraine and Iran are in many ways very similar in that Iran felt that it was existentially threatened by the Americans, and Americans, I think, will back off from threatening. Russia never did. Russia never,
Yeah.
there was this meme after Venezuela, which I fully endorsed and supported in my raging TDS DS. The meme was President Trump like holding down Venezuela and saying to Russia, like, hey, this is how you do a special military operation. Like, America, fuck yeah, right? Like, it was a great, great meme. President Putin thought on February 21st, 2020, he was going to be in a couple of weeks. Trump shows up, takes Maduro, 40 dead Cubans, no Americans, done, mic drop, what's up? Well, now the shoe is on the other foot. US is in the situation, but to Trump's credit, I think, knock on wood, let's see what happens. I don't think he's going to just triple down the way Putin did. Because, we will see, right? But
We'll see it. We'll see if he has his Mubarak moment. I don't know if you saw this interview yesterday of him in the Oval, where somebody asked him about whether Americans really cared about this, and I'll quote the president here: "Americans don't care about $4 gas prices. They're feeling a lot safer now that we got rid of that madman called Khamenei."
ah,
Turn on the TikTok camera, President Trump. Americans care much more about $4 gas than they care about the fact that you assassinated Khamenei. You're supposed to know this because the whole reason you're sitting at that desk is because Joe Biden thought the exact same way that you did. Can we get these boomers out of here? My
no,
God.
but wait. I take it. I know what you mean, and I respect it. But I also would say, but he's declaring victory. Like, he's saying, like, assassinating Khamenei the elder and putting it Khamenei the junior is somehow like making anyone safer. So, like, God bless him. He's declaring victory and taking his toys and going home. Unlike Putin, and that's what I was getting at. You've got Iran
Yeah.
and Ukraine. You've got Iran and Ukraine, right? These two countries existentially threatened, but one is facing a president Trump who knows how to play media, knows the PR, and quite frankly, I think has more marbles than Putin. Sorry, but I think we're witnessing the art of declaring victory whenever you want. Putin is so stubborn about this stupid northeastern corner of Donetsk that he hasn't, and he could have declared victory too. He could have declared victory at any point, and he never did. And so Iran is facing somebody who's willing to just declare victory and go home. I think Iran, therefore, will have to eventually say, okay, fine, like, we'll just make money off of Hormuz and de-escalate.
I
Ukraine,
think what you're underscoring is that Vladimir Putin actually, once you get down to the bare, essence of his soul, he actually has some principles. And one of his principles is that Ukraine
oh my
does
God,
not exist. He
you sound
cannot let it go.
you sound like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski. Like, say what you will about National Socialism, but at least it had an ethos. Like, that's
That's the greatest compliment I've ever gotten, that I sound like that. But,
but no, but look, what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is that we just spent, and I know we're out of time. We just spent an hour and 13 minutes debating whether or not Iran is going to de-escalate once Trump takes his toys and goes home. But you just brought in a really interesting zag, which is that unlike Iran, which is facing an off again, on again Trump, who knows what he believes in, certainly not that Iran doesn't have the right to exist. Ukrainians actually are facing a country that hasn't decided to take its toys and go home. President Putin has not
mhm.
declared victory. At various times he could have. So actually, we just spent an hour and 13 minutes discussing how Iran eventually will de-escalate because of the game theory of their situation. But it's Ukraine that actually just learned a really valuable lesson. which is like, holy shit, what have we been doing? Screw fighting Russia. Let's go all the way and destroy all of their energy facilities with drones.
Mm-hmm.
So I like your zag, and there you go. There is how you can leave. I know our fans are mad at us because we're not talking enough about doom and gloom. So there you go. We just landed the
Well,
plane in doom
no,
and
no.
gloom land.
The doom and gloom is this, because this will probably come out after the speech. If on that speech, President Trump has his Hosni Mubarak moment or his Vladimir Putin moment, and he triples down, buckle up your
Oh,
seatbelts, y'all,
well, that's the
because it's
obvious.
gonna be
No, no, no. But
awful.
wait, Jacob. Okay, so first of all, that's the obvious take. Like if the US starts like invading Karg Island and stuff, if that's what the speech tonight is about, like you're absolutely right. Like market's gonna be down massively. But I think everybody listening to this knows it. I mean, if you're listening to Geopolitical Cousins, I think you're probably already like self-selected to know that if President Trump doubles down and doesn't declare victory tonight on April 1st, then like game over for the economy. But if he does, what you've revealed is that there is this other outcome, which is that it's not Middle East, it's not Iran and the US that we should be worried about. It's that Ukraine has learned a lesson from what just happened. And I love the fact that
Mhm.
we just came to this on the show, like right now in real time. I mean, this is why, again, this is a dynamic conversation. But yeah, you want to be bearish about something, is that Ukraine looks around and says, oh, okay, so this is how you react to losing oil supply. You actually start like caring about stuff. Oh, and by the way, I know they've been trying to do that for 12 months. They've obviously been attacking, but I think there's been some level of restraint in Kiev and Zelensky. Like, I think he's felt like, okay, well, I shouldn't like piss off my Western supporters too much. But after just witnessing what's going on, where all the attention focuses on Hormuz and Israel and Iran, he's probably saying, like, nah, you know what? Gloves are off. Like, let's send every drone we have in the direction of Russian energy infrastructure. And let's start wanton warfare because I want my share. I want
Yeah,
my corner.
and here's another great tag. And we'll send our extra drones to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates so they can send the drones at Iran because they don't
Yeah.
want to give up either. Boom, we're going to destroy everything unless you give us what we want. Amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Scary
okay,
stuff.
I think we'll leave it there. Anything else we want to tell the listeners, cousin?
I think I think that's it. Go Lakers. Hopefully we
Go
have jet
Lakers.
fuel for playoffs to happen. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we can always just do it in the bubble. Bring them all to one place and let
I
them all
mean,
play each other.
Lakers are 1-0. So let's go. Like, second banner coming up in the bubble.
Okay. All right. Cheers, y'all.